Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink, it is time for some PathOfExile discussion. Patch 3.22.2 went live yesterday while we were all looking at the announcement of the upcoming November events. Now the intention of this patch was to do three main things: a few bug fixes, a couple of little updates to the game, and of course all of the programming support necessary for those November events. If you did miss the full announcement of those events, I will put a link in the end of this video to a video that I did discussing them yesterday. Let's go through the things that are in 3.22.2. This will be a reasonably short video because the changes are relatively small. Firstly, let's go through the things that are listed as bug fixes. So there is going to be a reduced amount of player XP that you get for killing Lycia in the Sanctum. This is because one of the unique relics' benefit was applying all the time, whether you had that unique relic or not, and that is the Aureus coins being converted to experience upon defeating the Herald of the Scourge modifier. That is now only going to apply if you have the First Crest unique relic and the correct version of the First Crest unique relic for that effect, but Sanctum does still give a fair amount of XP even without that bug. Secondly, we have a bug fix related to map sustain. There's a number of nodes on the Atlas passive tree that cause one monster in each of your maps to drop an additional connected map. These were usually working, now they will always work. But probably the most important thing here is the changes that are being made to breach splinters, because there were a couple of bugs that were slightly suppressing the amount of breach splinters that you were getting. Not the breach splinters that you got for killing regular monsters within the breach, but the ones that you got when a breach lord popped in to say hello. What this bug did as an entire package was make it so that modifiers on your Atlas did not apply to the splinters that were being dropped by the breach lord themselves. So if Chayula popped in to say hello in your map, and you killed Chayula, and you got X splinters for doing that, X was based upon a blank Atlas, rather than the Atlas you actually have. Whereas now that will be based upon the Atlas you actually have and any other modifiers that may be in play. Now if you're a Trade League player, what the effect of this is going to be is that breach stones are going to become a bit cheaper because they're going to be easier to farm, and it's probably going to be net neutral. If you play in solo self-found, this is likely to be a buff to the amount of access that you have to breach stones, but not a really big one because most of these splinters that you get actually come from the regular monsters, not from the breach lords. They're a small part of it, but that small part will increase as a result. There's also been a graphical change that, depending upon your preferences, may be a buff or a nerf, and that is that a bug that was causing the Scion and the Duelist to be graphically swapped around with the Saviour unique sword, the Mirage Saviours that were summoned, this is no longer in play. So instead of having a Scion that has Duelists as Mirage Saviours, you will now have a Scion that has Scions as Mirage Saviours. This is graphical only, but the old bug was too funny not to mention here. There's also a couple of other little changes there. Now let's go through the things that are considered to be actual changes. So firstly, all of the underlying tech that was needed to run the November events is now in the game. Secondly, the Voidborn Reliquary Key now has 523 more foil items. I went over this a bit more the last time Grinding Gear Games added a bunch of things into the Voidborn Reliquary Key, but these items that have been added late are likely to bias towards rarer items, which is likely to make the Voidborn Reliquary Key both a rarer drop in-game and also more likely to give a rare item when it is opened. This is also likely to mean that a small number of items that couldn't previously be acquired in a foil version will now have foil versions of them, although what those items are, I have no idea. When Sanctum went core in patch 3.22.0, Grinding Gear Games modified the list that you could choose from on the Voidborn Reliquary Key to include all of the Sanctum uniques. After this, they changed their mind, and everyone that had submitted Original Sin was reached out to and asked to pick something else. It appears here that they're pretty determined to make sure that the only source of Original Sins is going to be beating the no-hit Sanctum challenge. It's not going to be something that you can get through RNG methods. One thing I'm curious about is whether this also applies in the future to various boss drops or not, because it is definitely the case that the first of any given boss unique that exists in a league will come from a divination card if a divination card exists for it. For example, the first Nimbus that exists in any large trade league is going to come from the Fire of Unknown Origin, or potentially from a Void turn-in, rather than being from killing the Uber Eater of Worlds. Under Grinding Gear Games' current policies for Original Sin, the first one of them that enters a trade league, and also all subsequent ones, will be ones that have been acquired through the intended source for the item. This decision represents a considerable buff to Original Sin farming and its profitability, because it means that the product that they're creating is not going to be competing with things that are generated by RNG when people are going for, say, a Mage Blood instead. Now, there's a couple of graphics changes that have been made in this patch as well. One that's important to note is that this is a 4GB patch as a result, so if you haven't downloaded the patch yet, maybe pause the video, start the download, and then come back. Hopefully that way it'll finish a little bit earlier, and you'll be able to get back into the game earlier when you want to do so. There have been some changes to dynamic resolution tech, which is something that is a helpful upgrade for performance on low and medium end graphics cards. If you've got a high-end graphics card, you probably never encounter dynamic resolution, but if you've got something that's low or medium end, then hopefully, assuming that this actually works as well as grinding your games intended to, then this is going to mean that you will find that there's less flickering when you have, for example, Herald of Ice explosions going off at the same time as a Delirium Mist. Finally, there has pretty much always been a skill gem limit of level 40, gem level 40, that can be augmented up to. This is now clearly indicated if you manage to go over it. So this is a graphical change only, and it's just telling you that any further investment beyond this point is completely wasted. Anyway, that is patch 3.22.2. I'm going to leave it there. If you missed my video yesterday on the November events, I'll put a link to it down in the bottom left corner of the screen. May your Valobs have interesting results.